So we have another appalling mass shooting in the United States, and the normal arguments get made on both sides as to what we should do about it. Greater gun control, or not. And we all know that we're going to read the same articles, hear the same arguments as we did last time there was a mass shooting. Nothing happened then, probably nothing will happen now, and it'll be the same the next time it happens, and we can pretty much guarantee it will. Certainly all the while we can't move forward on this issue, that we remain in some deadlock. Now, I'm not going to make any comment on the Second Amendment or gun control. There's hundreds of other people doing that. You don't need my input. My expertise, however, is in political psychology, communication, and persuasion. So it is interesting to me the way in which this issue is, unfortunately, tragically, a rather perfect one for understanding how and why two sides of a important issue talk past each other. Now look, to my friends on the pro-gun control side, I know it sounds absurd when you hear those folks on the other side, Second Amendment guys, the more conservative guys, the libertarian guys, saying this is about freedom. I get that you, quite reasonably, see that as a red herring. I mean, the fact is there are loads of guns, and the fact is that innocent people are getting predictably and continually murdered in large numbers. And moreover, this is a problem that certainly in this manifestation seems to afflict the United States in a way that other countries in the developed world are not afflicted. So those arguments from freedom, from natural rights that you hear on the other side probably just sound all too hollow and insincere. I understand that. But they're not. They're sincerely held. And I say that as a... and they're sincerely held and reasonably held. I think that's the important point. And I say that as a Brit. I say that as someone who came to America from a country where we don't have guns, where the idea of anyone wanting to own a gun, certainly enjoying himself with a gun, is an anathema. To most Brits, anyone that would take their child to the range to get comfortable with something designed to kill people, such a person would be perhaps weird, strange, different, very different, probably with respect to their ideas about violence, or indeed even social norms. And so we would otherize such a person in Britain. Just as I think the left otherize the pro-Second Amendment folks in this country. Now I get why you would, because you see the outcomes of the prevalent gun ownership in the form of dead bodies. But look, Gandhi was against the disarming of the population, and Hitler was for it. And there is a reason for that. The folks who are passionate about keeping their guns, and I'm going to say it, and they often won't, because to hear it it comes off so distasteful. But for those folks for whom murder, homicide with a firearm, even in the numbers that we have that in our country, is a reasonable price to pay for freedom, as they see it. And I know that sounds absurd to folks on the other side of this, but to those folks, they know something about this country's history, and they know something about other countries' histories, and they know why there was a Second Amendment, and they get something that we can't experience in everyday life, which is that the reason that Second Amendment is there is so we can shoot at the government when it turns tyrannical, when it comes to take something from us that it shouldn't take. There's also, of course, the argument from self-defense that this is a natural right and you don't get to take away someone's rights because bad things happen at the hand of bad people. most rights are abused by bad people. One might say most rights are used to violate the rights of other people. But that doesn't mean they're not rights. Okay? And that might seem an all too abstract argument to the gun control folks. It might seem almost insultingly irrelevant. But I think there's a historical case. I think there's a historical justification for being passionate about maintaining one's right to self-defense, especially against a tyrannical state. It's happened time and time again, and you can never see it coming. Think about that. You can never see the tyranny coming in the deadliest form that would require you to shoot back. It's unimaginable, isn't it? But it was always unimaginable throughout history before it wasn't anymore. So look, my friends on the, if I can say more progressive friends on the gun control side of this, part of the problem you're having is when you're talking about violence, you're missing the point held by the other folks, by the Second Amendment folks. And to my Second Amendment folks, friends, when you're talking about freedom, you're entirely missing the point of the gun control folks. You're talking past each other. But to those gun control folks, you've got a bit more of a problem in a way. Because the guys who are hanging on to their guns, who believe that those guns, when push comes to shove, will enable them to protect themselves from tyranny, from bad actors, that sense is being exacerbated by the fact that, to them, many of the people who are advocating gun control are the same people who are rather cavalier with their rights in other ways. Think about that. See, there's a lack of trust. And I know that must be really hard to hear if you are coming from a place of wanting to stop violence against innocent people. But there are many of us who look at government growing and the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, and its taking down of the right to due process. The same with the Patriot Act and its elimination of right after right in the Bill of Rights. And we don't trust the people who would be left with all the guns once the citizens don't have them anymore. And they see many of you on the gun control side, and they see that you're the same people who are supporting those politicians for whom the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is just an inconvenience. Now, of course, it is the case, and I completely agree. I am not a partisan. I am not a Republican. I don't identify conservative. It is, of course, the case that politicians on all sides are involved in taking down our rights. But for many, the gun is the ultimate backstop. If you're not speaking to that and acknowledging that fear and its reasonableness among folks with the Second Amendment, you're not going to be able to move this. You're not going to be able to find any fundamental change. You're not going to be able to cause any fundamental change in the Second Amendment versus gun rights situation in this country. So if you really want to stop violence, you need to address the fears of folks like me, and as I say, I'm not a partisan, but also folks who are partisans, maybe Republicans, conservatives, people who are passionate about guns. I don't own a gun. But you have to address their fears. You have to speak to them about why this trend for increasing government impingement isn't something they should worry about. You have to speak to them about why this particular taking away of a right isn't just another dot on the trend line. Because it certainly looks that way to a lot of folks. They need to know that freedom matters to you too. Now, and you might say, well, of course it does. Well, of course it does. But do you get why this thing is about freedom for them when it isn't for you? You see, the burden is on you if you're wanting to change the gun control laws to make them tighter because you're the one wanting the change. The other guys are just going to hold tight. And they've got the Constitution, and they've got the Bill of Rights, and they've got Supreme Court rulings, and they've got Gandhi, and they've got Hitler. And I know that just seems too cheap and too easy. But it's true, and you have to speak to it. You have to deal with it. Otherwise, you are just the same people coming for yet another right. If you care about the loss of innocent life, please try and see it from the other side. Everything I do is about getting out of your own paradigm to get into the other guy's paradigm. Not because you're wrong and they're right, but because that's the only way you can engage successfully in political persuasion. In my book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How You Get It Back, how we get it back, I do have a section called Your Problem with Guns or Gays is Not Political. I urge you to read that because there's another factor too here, which is that the political arguments on both sides, although very sincerely held, is almost a cover for what's really going on. See, what's really going on is there's a cultural gap. If you're an American urban progressive, you may have never touched a gun. They certainly don't appeal to you. Why should they? These are things made to do harm. They're made to kill people. What kind of a person would be comfortable with such a thing, let alone enjoy such a thing, let alone make a hobby out of such a thing? Someone like that, it's a bit strange, right? You shouldn't trust them. You feel kind of okay limiting the behavior of people like that. But the fact is, in America, there's a whole other bunch of people who have a different culture, or maybe subculture, maybe we should call it. Maybe they're rural Americans. Maybe they lived on a lot of land. Maybe everyone in their family had guns. Everybody in their family were good men and women. They were very responsible. And maybe those folks have good memories of, let's say, their father caring about freedom, being loyal, caring about natural rights, human rights. They know that their father that had that gun is no bad guy. They know that if the government was going to come and take that away from him, who they should be suspicious of, not their dad, but the government operative. You know, they work out of the same kind of offices as the IRS people that destroy lives and now are armed, right? Maybe they work out of the same offices as, well, you know, I don't need to do a diatribe about, you know, what happens when government gets out of control. The point being that those folks, on the other side, a lot of those Second Amendment folks, a lot of those pro-gun guys, guns mean something different to them as part of their identity. So when you come for their guns, you come for them. You come for what they care about. And they're doing no harm, you see. That's the problem. If you come at someone who knows he's doing no harm and would do no harm, then he's not going to react to your argument. He's going to react to the imposition. Most political conflicts aren't about the issue that the conflict seems to be about. They're about one side resisting being imposed upon. Think about it. Most political arguments really come down to one side being resisting being imposed upon. We've got to understand that. And I can already hear maybe some of my progressive friends watching this video saying, well, what about the children? What about the innocent people who are imposed upon by the madmen with guns? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we have to stop it. We have to stop it. But if you impose your will, seek to impose your will among a bunch of good people, and I know some of them, who have their weapons for good reason, reasons you may not agree with, but they've read some history. They know how it's worked before. They know, say, about Gandhi, and they know about the Second Amendment, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They know about America. They know about the tyrants that disarm populations. And they're feeling put upon already. They're feeling put upon already because they're being told at every turn what bad people they are, right? Which is basically a signal to say to somebody, doesn't matter what you think. We're coming at you. We're not even going to respect your argument because there's something defective about you morally. A lot of those folks on that side, they've been being told that for quite a while. It's not true, but they've been hearing it. So that's what you're up against. Don't make it worse. Don't create more division by telling those folks who are passionate about the Second Amendment, their right to self-defense and their right to fire back at a government that gets tyrannical. Don't tell them they don't care. Go make some friends with some of them. I mean that. And to those folks too, by the way, and I've said this to some of my gun-owning friends, they have to make friends with some of my other friends on the gun control side, right? Because then they'll discover that the folks on the gun control side, they don't want to take away their freedoms. Each side needs to speak the language of the other for long enough that they can reformulate this rather than a zero-sum political game as a shared problem with a shared goal. And once they've done that, maybe they can move together in broadly the same direction to solving it. Zero-sum games, political brute force, it's not something you want in politics if you can avoid it. You know, we had it with the Obamacare, right? And it's caused a lot of resentment. And I don't know if it will stick, and it may stick. But bad things are happening. It's created a lot of division and a lot of will on the other side to undo whatever, if there was any good done with Affordable Care Act, that the other side wants to undo it. It's using law and government to impose your will on those you disagree with. You can do politics that way, but in the long run, it's a recipe for disaster. Let's not do that with the Second Amendment. Please, let's not do that with innocent lives that are being taken by unhinged people with a gun or two. Thanks.